The open source Chinese debate, Jaeden, sort of went quiet for a while, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Sort of like when DeepSeek had its moment, everybody's like freaked out. Nvidia lost 95% of its market share to bring it down to just above $1 trillion. Okay, I'm joking. Don't quote me on that. But it was just like it had everybody freaking out, and then it seemed to go quiet for a while, and it's making a comeback in sort of a big way. And the thing that's been all over my feed, and Jaeden, I know you have this on AI Chat Daily, which is a really cool little news feed that people can read, is that Moonshot AI, which makes Kimi, which is, again, one of these things that's just like everybody's freaking out about. So this is a 2 trillion, 3 trillion parameter open weight model. We don't tend to talk in parameters as much as we used to back in the GPT-4 days to give a sense. The part that I think people are going to be freaking out about is that it seems to, or it's expected to match Opus 4.8, which I'm still having trouble getting my head around, but it's in the news enough that I'm like realizing this may be right. Can you talk, because you were sort of saying that you've been reading a bunch about this. Can you talk a little bit more about this? Because I just sort of like know what I'm reading here.
So there's so many different benchmarks, and it's basically there's a bunch of really interesting ones. One of them is the terminal bench. That's a pretty good developer benchmark, and it's 88. GPT 5.6 Sol is 88.8. It's 88.3. Opus 4.8 is 84.6. So both of them and OpenAI are smoking Opus 4.8. But we know that Fable 5 is kind of the better model. But Fable 5 it's at the same place as Opus 4.8 on that particular benchmark. So it's interesting. It's beating Fable 5 in some areas. It's a little bit worse in other areas. There's one that everyone's talking about that it really shines in, and that is the front end code arena. So it's like maybe not the best for back end code, but it comes to front end code and making good designs. It is like really, really smoking Fable 5 and 5.6, and like every other AI model is getting completely squashed. Even like the best Grok model is like way behind it. And so anyways, the reason why this is a big deal is because this isn't just another frontier lab. This is an open weight model. They've released this publicly. Anyone can go and take this model and you can fine tune it on your own personal data and get way better results than even what like Fable 5 could give you. And that's if it wasn't as good as Fable 5. But in some areas, it's better than Fable 5. So like if you were doing front end design, this is literally the best model, and it's open weight, meaning you can download it, run it on your own hardware, or a lot of times you're using it off of someone else's hardware, like a server, and you have an API to it or something. But this is the first time that the Chinese models are really starting to leapfrog some of the American models. Now, the interesting thing about this to me is my question of, would this have happened if Fable 5 hadn't had some sort of government intervention, lockdown, Mythos moment where Claude was like pulling back Mythos? They're not releasing it. Mythos is like their best model, but they're worried about the cybersecurity implications, so they're holding it back. Do these Chinese companies care about that? No. They're going to release whatever the model is, and whatever it can, like if they could beat some benchmarks, they're going to beat those benchmarks. So anyways, all this to say, it does bring an interesting conversation of, should the government be regulating and holding back AI? Should there be like, there's these things where like I think like the Trump administration was like pushing for like, we want like at first it was a 90-day, I think, and then they wanted to cut it down to 30 days. Like you got to give it to the government 30 days ahead of time, and we're going to like test it out. Like, my opinion is, if we go down the path of doing this and adding all this regulatory burden and state by state regulatory burden, a bunch of states are like, you got to give it to the state to test it out, and you got to pass these guardrails and stuff. If we're doing this, I mean, for better or for worse, which I think is for worse, we're going to fall behind the Chinese models that have way less regulation on so many levels on the American models. And it's like, this is not shocking to me. And the reason why it's not shocking, number one, they can scrape any data they want in the world to make their models for free. If you're Anthropic, you're going to pay $1.6 billion for illegally downloading all the books in the world, right? And you got to go pay all the authors back. Connor got a hefty payout. I think that's how he purchased his last house, was from his Anthropic royalties, right? And so, just kidding.
It was probably like $2.99. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, nice. Okay, really, really.
$2.99. But go on, yeah.
$2.9 million. Okay, so they got to go pay a fine, though. The Chinese models are not going to pay the fine. So the Chinese models can scrape all the data in the world, which means they have access to way more data. They are a little bit pinched on the chips, but they're making their own chips, and they can go black market, get their NVIDIA chips. They're all sneaky, right? And then, yeah, releasing the models, there's no guardrails or regulatory approval there if it's going to be open weight, sort of. I guess China does, like, you can't talk about Tiananmen Square on these models. So anyways, I guess there's a little pull and shove, but they have way less regulatory burden. If we overregulate AI in America, my opinion is that we will fall behind China.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and it's also, I didn't know where you're going with this story, because I really appreciate how you're bringing this to life around, like, why does this matter that Kimi has this? Because I think from some aspects, it's the headline, and let's just take a second and say, oh my gosh, like there's an open source model or open weight model, which they're very similar, but that can outperform Opus 4.8. Now, I'm not saying it can, but then, to Jaeden's point, you start to think like, okay, so how does it do that? So, we've talked about distillation on this show before, but just in case you don't know what that means, distillation is illegal. The idea is that if I'm an open weight model in China and I have to train my model, how do I do that? So the way that, above board frontier models do that is like, it costs a ton of money. They're sort of like, they're reading things on the internet. They're paying people to do this. They're sort of, doing things about like, is this a good answer or a bad answer? It's a ton of weight. Now imagine doing all that and then having somebody just kind of essentially come and steal your product. That's essentially, not exactly, but that's close to what these open source models will do. They'll just go and ask Claude, who's already done the heavy work, or ChatGPT, the heavy work, and just ask it, 200,000 questions and just sort of see how it answers and learn that way. So it's a very, very cheap way of learning. And that's how they do a lot of these things. But to Jaden's point, you think they're paying attention to what's legal and illegal in the United States of America, in New York State? Like, what do they care? So I think that that's really interesting. It also sort of like brings up the whole point about like, what will enterprise use when these models are so unbelievably cheap? I know companies that are using DeepSeek because they're like, it's probably fine. Like, so we're not going to ask questions about Tiananmen Square anyway. And other people are like, well, what about, this? And then the counter is like, yeah, but it's open source. Like, we're bringing their thing onto our machine. That's the privacy. It's not like we're not giving them any information. And everybody's like, are you sure? And they're like, yes, I'm sure. The cord is cut. It is on my machine. And other people are like, well, I don't know. And by the way, I'm not sort of saying that in a pejorative way. I don't know. I mean, to me, it doesn't make any sense how they could learn from this, but am I sure? No, I'm not. And so, but Jane, one other thing.
To be clear, they can't learn from it if it's an open source model on your machine.
That's the argument. But there's people be like, I don't know, it's a Chinese thing. I'm like, right, but that doesn't technologically, that does not work if it's living open source. And I put it on my machine, they can't learn. People are like, I wouldn't be too sure. I'm like, okay. Anyway, I won't kind of keep going back and forth with the conspiracy theories. But Jaden, I guess the point is that, like, do you remember back in the day when we had GPT-4? And everybody's like, as soon as we get a GPT-4 model that's open source or that's small enough that it can live on your phone, bam, privacy solved. You're going to have the be all end all model GPT-4 on your phone, and that's the end of history. GPT-4 is now a rock, right? It's now like sort of like it's an old Amazon Alexa. Like, that's how bad it is. Essentially, that's not how the world works. People are not just happy with sort of like a small, Claude or Open or GPT, whatever model that can live on your phone. They want the latest. That's what open source does. It gets the latest thing and then allows you to grab it. So, Jaden, when you're thinking about implications for companies, implications for people, should people go try this out? What should people be worried about, if anything? You've talked about sort of like the geopolitical implications, and I totally agree with you. Geopolitical meaning like we may fall behind in AI. But what about for somebody who's like, should I test this out or should I not?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, as like a free market kind of guy, like, geopolitical implications, it sucks to suck if you're OpenAI and can't figure out a response to this. If there's a cheaper open weight model that's better, go use Kimi. And I mean, if you're going to go use their API and you put your information in, then they're going to steal your information and use it to train it, and probably add it to the CCP government file of your name, of everything you like. But they already have that anyways, so I don't know what the difference is. Yeah. But yeah, no, I would say if it's better, especially open weight, use it. Fine-tune it. If you're an enterprise, use this to fine-tune your own data, make something incredible with it. I'm like so on board with that. The one thing that you brought up that was just an interesting point I want to touch on, which is you said like we all thought GPT-4 was like the end-all be-all greatest thing. Privacy would be solved if we had an open source version of that. And now we have even better versions of that OpenAI released, like their own open source kind of versions, whatever. The thing that I think you have to know with these models, every time a new model comes out, it's like, oh my gosh, this thing is so smart. It's one-shotting XYZ. It's so good. And the one thing that I'll bring up is I think we give AI models way more credit than what they're actually doing. And no AI model is really as good as when an AI model does something impressive, in my opinion, it's not just because the AI model's great, it's because the person prompting it has a lot of expertise in a particular area. I go like watch these like videos or see these posts on X where they're like, check out this landing page I made. And it's like, I one-shotted this with Fable 5, and it's like a landing page where when you move your mouse, like the beads of the door like sway and like it does all this cool stuff. And when you scroll, there's a giant animation of a cat running around. And I'm like, that's amazing. I go tell Claude to try to do it and it doesn't do it. And it's like, so much of what we create is still Claude is still using our brain. Like we're subsidizing the work that Claude's doing with our brain. I don't know how to say it. And other than like Claude can do things, it can speed things up, it can write our ideas down, but like your brain, a huge chunk of your brain is being put into there. And at some point, as these models get better and better, I only bring that up to say like at some point you won't need as much of your brain. Let's say we'll extrapolate to where it could just figure out what to do. It's going to have taste. It's going to know. It's going to whatever. But I think we have like 100 years ahead of us of these AI models progressively getting better forever. And so anyways, it seems amazing now because it's a new capability we have, but we're light years away of where it's going, where it could be. And I think we over-index and we credit AI for what it can do when so much of it is still pulling from your brain. You're still thinking about what it's doing and putting stuff together. Anyways.
Agreed. Go on.
All this to say, these models are getting good. Kimi 3 is awesome. The banning AI data centers is hilarious to me. If you saw the news, Kathy, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said that her office used AI to review every rural regulation policy in the state in a matter of months, something that she said would have taken them about 5 years. I'm so thrilled with her. Huge congratulations to Kathy. I think this is an incredible move on her part. She got rid of a whole bunch of ridiculous regulations. She said there was one where like if you were pregnant, it was illegal. You had to get like a permit to work past 10 p.m. and like you had to go get like a permit if you wanted to go hunting with your dog, and like just permits and regulation for like a billion years that just never got cleaned up. And she went and used AI to go clean all that out. So a huge kudos to Kathy on getting that done. But at the same time, she also banned data centers for a whole year in New York. So I just feel like there's two sides of the coin. It feels a little hypocritical. Let's not overregulate ourselves for the geopolitical reasons, so China doesn't get ahead. But if China makes a great tool, like I'm still going to be using it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's understanding the implications are huge, and I think that's sort of like the moral of the story here. Like we can sort of like track how big these models are, how small they are, or anything like that, or sort of like what's happening with data centers. Just remember that there's the technology thing, it's what it has to do with you, and then there's the politics, and those three things, do not confuse them, because like with data centers, everything else, like this is politics, like anti-AI sentiment is very political, everything like that right now. But just remember, what does this mean for you? What do open source things mean for you? And that's the big thing. And so like, and if Jaeden is telling me like, hey, go try this out, I'm gonna go try it out because he has more experience on the open source stuff than I do. Listen, this is a conversation that I could carry on for another 20 minutes, Jaeden. We're gonna get off. Listen, guys, thanks for tuning in. As always, if you're going to know what I'm going to say here, but if you haven't left a rating review, this is your time. I promise I'm going to stop saying this when we hit, well, maybe like 10,000 reviews. I don't know what the number is, but like, yeah, I'm probably never going to stop. But we really are shooting for 200. We can't wait to get there. We are just 13 away. 13. Who are our 13 heroes out there? Anyway, listen, we love you guys tuning in. Thanks for being part of this show, and we'll see you on the next episode.